and relaxed, I could make a sound. When I was really forcing the effort with the conch, nothing was coming out. So that's my kind of first observation, reflection, if you like, with regard to effort. I'm not going to blow it now, only under ceremonial conditions. Yeah, so I mentioned that, or we know that we're looking at the Eightfold Path, and we're actually onto the sixth limb now of the Eightfold Path, which is right effort or perfect effort, which I'm sure you all know. The Sanskrit for that, by the way, let me see if I can put something in the chat, is Vyayama, something like that, which means a lot of different things. It means things like exertion, effort, that kind of thing. But there's also another important list which touches on the theme of effort, which includes effort, which are the 6 paramitas. Maybe you know those as well. So one of the 6 paramitas is virya. And virya, sometimes it's translated as energy, but you could translate it as effort, I think, as well. But particularly, it's a kind of effort in a particular direction. So it's not any old effort or energy. Bhante, I think, summarized it as energy in pursuit of the good, or in pursuit of the goal. So that's virya. So I'm just mentioning it because I think there's a bit of overlap between those. Well, there's quite a lot of overlap between those two ideas, virya and vyayama. Yeah. And just to finish off with a few kind of bits of Pali and Sanskrit, there's another word that we find particularly in the Pali canon, which is atapi, which I think, strictly speaking, relates to the idea of heat, if I'm not mistaken, becoming heated up, if you like. But it's usually translated as something like ardent. Ardent seems to me to be a much underused word. We could use that a lot more, I think. So ardent, diligent as well. Diligent is another way of translating virya too, diligence. I don't know whether you like this, but zealous could be another word to translate these things. Zeal sounds a lot better than zealous, doesn't it? Zeal sounds like it's something that's quite good, and to be zealous doesn't sound quite so good, but I think that's probably just the associations that we built up with those words. But zeal is kind of enthusiasm, energy, engagement, that kind of thing. So these are all kind of words that that are to do with effort. And so I had a few points that I wanted to at least briefly talk about, mention. The first one, and maybe there's a bit of an assumption here, but the first one, I was asking myself, why don't we make effort in the Dharma life? But maybe I could qualify that and say, why don't we make more effort? Why don't we make more effort than we do? You might be thinking, oh, well, I make a huge amount of effort, so what's he talking about? So that's fine. That's fine. I don't. So I'm talking to me at least, and maybe there's some others of you that could think, yeah, it's true. Sometimes I don't make as much effort as I might do. Yeah, so why is that? Why, for instance, when there's a choice between, I don't know, reading the Bodhicharyavatara and watching a Netflix series, why is it that we think, Netflix, or if it's a choice between, I don't know, going out for a very nice curry, or using that money to buy a Buddhist scripture and read it, we think, I fancy that curry. maybe that's not you, but I can't believe that it's that unusual, this kind of state of affairs, you know. Yeah, so, you know, why is our effort, if you like, limited or restricted in relation to the Dharma life? The first answer, in a way I've been hinting at already, is because we're still intoxicated with samsara. We're still addicted, if you like, to samsara. We still believe, after all these years, that samsara is going to answer our problems. It's hard. It's a hard one to admit that, but I think probably all of us still have something of that within us. And so what that means is that we continually think, we continue, I should say, to choose options that are investments in samsara and not investments in the path towards enlightenment. I'm not saying it's completely black and white. Obviously, most of our experiences is of some and some, but at least some of the time, we are still making samsaric choices because on some level we still believe that maybe even after all these disappointments, they are going to satisfy us. And more specifically, I would say, and this is not me saying this is Shantideva saying this in the Bodhicharya Avatara, is because we don't understand karma sufficiently. So what karma teaches us is that the actions that we undertake, the directed actions, the chosen actions that we undertake, particularly those with an ethical content, they will have consequences for our future. More specifically, if we act in skillful ways, those skillful actions will give rise to joy and happiness in the future, satisfaction in the future. And on the other hand, if we entertain thoughts and actions that are unskillful, you know, that have a base in greed, hatred, and delusion, those actions will result in our unhappiness in the future. They'll result in suffering for us in the future. In a way, it's a really quite a simple idea, isn't it? Karma and its consequences. But on some level, we still haven't fully absorbed it, or we still need to reflect on it. That's what Shantideva recommends, that we reflect more on karma, and that will then motivate us to put our hearts more fully into the Dharma life. So that's interesting, that there can be a relationship between reflection or understanding and effort. You know, it's not just about forcing things, it's also about understanding things. And so that understanding breeds a new attitude, a new kind of effort. Yeah, just to finish this, why don't we make more effort in the Dharma life point? I realized that I had no idea when I started. So how long have I been speaking for, Padmatara? Have you got any idea?
Not very long, about 15 minutes.
Great. Okay, fine. Yeah, so we do make a lot of effort. So I want to make out that you're not making a lot of effort. You are making a lot of effort, probably a lot more effort than I am. We do make a lot of effort, but we make effort of the wrong kind. So to go back to my example of the conch, you know, I was making a lot of effort with a conch, but there was no sound coming out because I wasn't making the right kind of effort. So the issue of effort isn't necessarily about more effort. It's about applying effort in the right kind of way, making the right kind of effort. So I'm going to explore that a little bit more in what follows, that idea of making the right kind of effort. Yeah, so just because we're making a lot of effort and doing a lot of things, it doesn't mean that we're actually achieving anything. at least not in terms of a life in the Dharma. And I'm reminded of a phrase that is, I believe, from Gampopa, the Tibetan teacher. And he talks about laziness. And normally when we think about laziness, well, we think about it as doing nothing, right? Sitting around doing nothing. That's what being lazy is. But he talks about the laziness of busyness. The laziness of busyness. So being busy is being lazy. It's kind of very different, I think, from our usual way of thinking about what being lazy is. So maybe it's just worth dwelling a bit on how could that be? How could it be that to be busy is to be lazy? And I think we live very much in a culture where to be busy is seen as a virtue. You know, if you ask anyone, and I'm afraid this includes most Buddhists, how are you? All really busy, or lots of things on. And this seems to be how we go about things, being really busy. In our world in general, to do lots of things is seen as a virtue, being really busy. It means that you're maybe important or something because you're doing lots of things. But to be busy is not a virtue in the Dharma life, and may in fact be a vice, depending a little bit about how you go about your busyness. Because very often, well, what is it that we're busy doing is the question. You know, what are we busy doing? Are we busy gaining enlightenment, or are we busy distracting ourselves from the path? I leave that open for you. What is it that we use our time for? What are we, all this busyness that we're into, where's it all going? Is it taking us anywhere nearer to enlightenment, or is it in fact just clouding our minds and distracting us from what is really the most important thing that we should pay attention to? So being busy is not necessarily right effort, and is quite often wrong effort. And to give a couple of analogies, the kind of effort that we need to make in the Dharma life is not like digging a hole. So when you dig a hole, to get it bigger, you keep digging, right? And you just keep going, keep digging. And there's a lot of effort involved there. And sooner or later you get a hole. Great. It's more like watering a plant. The kind of effort that we need to make is more like watering a plant. So you don't keep watering a plant all the time. And in fact, most plants, if you water them too much, they will actually die. So it's about watering them at the right time, at the right interval. And then it's about having the confidence and the patience to just let the plant grow, which is actually quite hard to do sometimes, I think, because we want to force things along. We want things to happen very quickly. And we think the way to make that happen is to do more. But that isn't necessarily the case. The other example that I was thinking about is, I've just started thinking about Karina Davies' cookies now, because that came up earlier. But actually my analogy is of bread. So I'm not a great bread baker, I will admit that, but I think probably at least once or twice in my life, I've probably, made a loaf or two. So to make bread, you need dough, and you add to the dough yeast or some kind of raising agent. And then once you've done that, you just have to leave the dough, I should say, and then it begins to rise. I hope I'm right about this. I think this is true. And you don't need to do anything. That's a process that happens by itself, but it happens on the basis of having applied the raising agent. So there are a couple of analogies of how maybe how effort might work in the context of the Dharma life that might be different from how we normally think about effort. I'm just going to take that a bit further, really, these ideas a bit further, and kind of signal some of the problems that I can see associated with our usual ideas of effort. So I imagine, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I imagine that all of you were very assiduous students at school. I don't know why I'm assuming that, but I'm sure you were. I often wasn't, I must admit. Sometimes I was. But anyway, the point is that we get this idea that if you want to achieve something, you have to put a lot of effort into it. And the more effort that you put in, the more you will achieve. At least that's what our teachers seem to tell us, right? The more effort you put in, the more you will achieve. And we associate the idea of effort with precisely that idea, achievement, or some kind of goal. So if I revise hard enough, I'll do well in my exams, or if I work hard enough, I'll get a promotion, and so on. And to some extent, this works, at least in certain fields, in certain contexts. But what I want to note is that goals are usually very self-centered. They're usually to do with things that we want, things that we want to achieve. And so the effort that we express or that we apply is often quite a self-centered or self-oriented effort. Is my effort, basically. I do it and I achieve it. And this is how we think. We want to accomplish something, we make the effort, and then we congratulate ourselves at the end for having done so well. Or maybe not, if we haven't done so well. So our idea of effort is very, very self-centered, self-absorbed. And we think that it's something that comes from ourselves. And we think that it's our effort that achieves the result that we want. And I think that's quite a limited way of thinking about effort, particularly in the context of the Dharma life, this idea of achieving a goal, particularly if we apply that goal, apply that to the idea of enlightenment. Because what we start to do is to conceptualize enlightenment as a goal of our ego, and we then start to strive towards it. In a sense that it's something that we can incorporate into ourselves. So as a way of trying to open this out a bit more, what I would suggest is that instead of trying to achieve enlightenment, we need a shift of perspective is what we need. We need to shift our way of seeing things. And that is the kind of effort that we need to make, that shift of perspective. When we normally try to understand something, we try to understand it using what we could call a masterly gaze. A masterly gaze. So the masterly gaze wants to see everything. And the masterly gaze thinks it can see everything and that it will see everything. It will at some stage have this bird's eye view. So the masterly gaze looks upon things with the intention to master. I was going to say dominar. Dominar, master. And that kind of masterly gaze is a sort of consuming way of seeing things or relating to things. So as I mentioned a bit before, enlightenment becomes something that we consume. and incorporate into ourselves, rather than thinking that enlightenment requires us to be changed, or even us to surrender ourselves. So just to spell out a bit more what I'm trying to get at, I hope this works. I'm going to show you a picture now. Let's see. Can you see that? Yeah. Does anybody know this picture? I think Medashri knows it. This picture is called The Ambassadors, and it was painted by Hans Holbein the Younger in 1533. I think it's in a gallery in London, if I'm not wrong. And Hans Holbein was, one of the Flemish or Dutch masters. So we can see in this painting two, I'm reading from notes here, by the way, two wealthy, educated, and powerful young men. On the left is Jean de Dintville, aged 29, who was the French ambassador to England in 1533. And on the right is his friend, Georges de Selve, who was 25 when this painting was. They look a lot older to me, but anyway, that's how old they are. Maybe it's the beards. And he was the Bishop of Lavaux, who acted as an ambassador to the Emperor, the Venetian Republic, and the Pope. So that's the painting. But there's something else in this painting that may not be immediately obvious, which you can kind of see towards the bottom. But you probably can't see it very clearly. So this picture makes use of a technique which is called anamorphosis. Anamorphosis. And actually, I'm going to give away a secret here. What is actually at the bottom of the painting is a skull. Maybe you can just about make it out. But the skull can only be seen properly if you're looking at the painting from the right to left, and if you're below the painting, which is difficult for us. Yeah. So in other words, in order to be able to see the skull, you have to shift perspective. You have to move your viewing point. To put it another way, you have to give up the masterly gaze and accept the demands of the painting. So the painting requires you to move to a particular viewpoint in order to be able to see it. Yeah. Well, that's enough on that. Yeah, it's not the only painting of that kind, by the way, but it's one of them. So where does all this fit in? Well, it fits in relation to a shift of perspective that I would like to describe as a shift from self-power effort to other power effort. So self-power effort is the effort that we make, or that I make, to become enlightened. Other power effort is effort, or is, more properly speaking, the enlightened mind being gifted to me by Amitabha. And in order to spell that out a bit more, I'm going to read, so this is really shameless, but I'm going to read something from this book that I've recently published, which is called Seeing Like a Buddha, The Four Noble Truths. But to make it a little less shameless, what I'm going to actually read is not actually something from me. It's from Bhante Sangha. So first of all, a few years ago, I was reading some of Bhante's travel letters, which are called Through Buddhist Eyes. They're quite hard going, I'll admit, but they're worth a go. They're worth the effort, I think, Through Buddhist Eyes. Anyway, this is what I read. The path of dependence on self-power is for the spiritually less advanced, and the path of dependence on other power for the spiritually more advanced. So I read this and I thought, that seems a bit odd. because what I previously heard and learnt was that generally speaking, the path of self-power is considered to be a more advanced path, and the path of other power, like for people who can't really make the effort, kind of thing. So Bhante in this passage was saying the direct opposite. So I was quite confused by this, and I decided to write to him. So this was in, I think, 2014, and he replied to me, and this is what he wrote. In the ordinary activities of life, we're accustomed to making an effort. There are all sorts of things that we want, and we work hard to get them. In all this, we rely upon our own efforts, i.e., on self-power. When we take up the spiritual life, we naturally tend to adopt a similar approach. We seek to gain wisdom or attain enlightenment. The path of self-power, therefore, makes fewer demands of us, inasmuch as it is in accordance with our natural human tendency and does not require a fundamental shift in this respect. For this reason, I say that the path of dependence on self-power is for the spiritually less advanced. As for the path of dependence on other power being for the spiritually more advanced, this is because in order to follow this path, one has to surrender to the other power, which means giving up one's self-power. Such surrender or complete letting go of self-power is extremely difficult, directly opposed as it is to our natural human tendency. Hence, I say that the path of dependence on other power is for the spiritually more advanced. So that was really about what I wanted to say. Those were the thoughts that I'd had. So thanks for listening.
Thank you.